morning, Master.
Good morning, Jeannie.
Oh, Master, you shouldn't have.
I know, I didn't.
You mean that present
Most people miss this giant blooper in this iconic Gilligan's...
is not for me?
No?
It is for another girl.
Hey there, TV lovers. Welcome back to the channel. Today,
Oh, I am sorry, Master, but I'm having a terrible time with my hair. I simply do not know how to use these silly things.
we're diving into one of the most beloved classic sitcoms of all time. I Dream of Jeannie. You know, that magical show with the beautiful Jeannie in the pink outfit, her astronaut master, and all those hilarious situations that kept audiences laughing for 5 incredible seasons. But here's the thing. Behind all that sparkle and magic, there were mistakes. Lots of them. And some of these bloopers are so obvious once you see them that you'll wonder how anyone missed them in the first place. We're going to count down some of the most fascinating mistakes from the show, building up to one massive slip-up that went completely unnoticed for decades. Seriously, this final blooper is so big that it changes the way you look at the entire series. So stick around until the end, because you're not going to want to miss it. Let's get started. Let's talk about one of the earliest bloopers that shows just how much work went into making television back in the 1960s. In the 3rd episode of Season 1, called Guess What Happened on the Way to the Moon, Tony and Roger get dropped off in the middle of the desert for astronaut survival training. It's supposed to be a tough challenge, but of course, Jeannie can't help herself. She decides to make things more exciting by magically making a big wild cat appear on a nearby rock. Now, at first glance, this scene looks pretty scary. Tony picks up a rock to defend himself. The cougar looks ready to pounce, and the whole moment feels dangerous. But if you pause the video and look really carefully at the close-up shot, you'll notice something strange. There's a rope around the cougar's neck. Yep, a safety rope. It's there to make sure the animal doesn't actually attack Larry Hagman, the actor who played Major Nelson. Back in those days, television didn't have computer effects like we do now. Everything had to be done with real props, real animals, and real tricks. So when they needed a cougar in a scene, they had to bring in a real one and keep it safe with ropes and trainers. The problem was that sometimes the camera got a little too close, and those safety measures became visible on screen. It's actually pretty funny when you think about it. Instead of seeing wild magic and danger, you're seeing a very practical solution doing its job. But hey, the scene still works because the comedy and Tony's reaction make it entertaining, even if the threat is literally tied down. Here's another great example of practical effects gone wrong. In Season 1, Episode 9, titled The Moving Finger, Jeannie gets super jealous because Major Nelson is spending time with another woman. So what does she do? She makes it rain, inside the house. It's hilarious. Nelson and his date get completely soaked. They're confused and scrambling for cover, and Jeannie is just standing there enjoying the chaos. But if you look closely during this scene, especially right above Larry Hagman's head, you can actually see the machine that's creating the rain. The pipes and nozzles from the rain equipment peek out from the top of the screen like an uninvited guest crashing the party. Creating rain on a television set back then was no easy task. It required big, heavy equipment with tubes and sprayers, and the crew had to position everything just right so it wouldn't show up on camera. Unfortunately, in this case, the camera angle wasn't perfect, and the whole illusion fell apart. What's charming about this blooper is that the characters don't seem to notice at all. Nelson is awkward, Jeannie is pleased with herself, and the moment still works because the actors sell it so well. Most viewers back then never caught the mistake because they were too busy laughing at the situation. But now, with crystal clear reruns and the ability to pause and zoom in, that rain machine is impossible to miss. Let's talk about a wardrobe mistake that's just plain silly. In that same desert survival episode from Season 1, Tony and Roger are supposed to be stranded in the blazing hot sun with nothing but their survival skills to rely on. The episode really tries to sell the idea that these guys are suffering in the heat, dealing with harsh desert conditions, and struggling to make it through the challenge. But here's the problem. If you look down at Roger Healy's feet, you'll see he's wearing a pair of heavy, insulated boots called Mickey Mouse boots. These boots got their nickname because of their big, round, bulky shape, and they were designed for cold weather. We're talking Arctic conditions, snow, ice, and freezing temperatures. They're literally the opposite of what you'd want to wear in a hot desert. Seeing Roger stomp around the sand in boots meant for the North Pole is pretty hilarious. It completely takes away from any sense of realism the scene was trying to create. The most likely explanation is that the costume department just grabbed whatever military surplus gear they had on hand and didn't think too much about whether it actually fit the situation. For viewers back in the 60s, it probably didn't matter much. But for us today, it's just another funny reminder that even the costumes on I Dream of Jeannie had their share of mistakes. Now let's move on to a different kind of blooper. The kind that happens during editing. In Season 2, Episode 60, called My Master the Author, there's a scene where an envelope gets slipped under Major Nelson's door. It's supposed to be a simple setup for an important plot point. But if you watch carefully, that envelope has a mind of its own. In one shot, the envelope is lying neatly aligned with the edge of the door. Then the camera cuts away for just a second to show Tony or Jeannie, and when it comes back, the envelope has mysteriously rotated about 90 degrees. Nobody touched it. Nobody moved it. It just changed position all on its own. This kind of continuity error happens because television shows back then were filmed in bits and pieces. They'd shoot the same scene multiple times from different angles, and then later, editors would stitch all those shots together. The problem was that props didn't always get put back in exactly the same spot between takes. So when you watch the final product, things jump around a little bit. In this case, the wandering envelope is a perfect example of that. It doesn't ruin the scene at all, but once you notice it, it's hard to unsee. Some fans even joke that maybe Jeannie gave the envelope a little magical nudge just for fun. One of the most enchanting moments in the entire series happens in Season 2, Episode 22, titled, There Goes the Best Jeannie I Ever Had. In this scene, Jeannie floats gracefully into a room with her legs crossed, looking like she's levitating through pure magic. For audiences in the 60s, it looked absolutely dazzling, proof that Jeannie really was a magical being. But if you pause the video and look really closely, you'll see the secret behind the magic. There are thin wires holding Barbara Eden up, and underneath her costume, she's sitting on a shiny metal rig that lifts her across the set. Now, back then, television screens were much smaller, and the picture quality was a lot fuzzier, so most people never noticed these details. The wires were hidden enough to keep the illusion alive during the original broadcast. What really sells this scene, though, is Barbara Eden herself. Her calm expression, her graceful posture, and her perfect timing make you believe she's actually floating, even if the equipment is visible. This blooper isn't really an error so much as a reminder of how creative and resourceful television makers had to be back then. Without modern computer effects, they had to rely on old-fashioned stage magic, pulleys, wires, and clever camera angles. And honestly, it worked pretty well. In that same episode, there's another special effects slip-up that's hard to miss once you know what to look for. When Jeannie emerges from her bottle, she appears in a thick cloud of blue smoke. It's one of the show's signature effects, used to emphasize her magical entrances and exits. To create that mystical blue smoke, the crew used a simple trick. They shot ordinary white smoke and then shined a strong blue spotlight on it to give it that magical color. The problem is that the lighting didn't just hit the smoke. It also spilled onto Barbara Eden's skin, giving her arms an unnatural blue glow, almost like she was lit up with neon lights. That definitely wasn't the intention. The crew just wanted the smoke to look magical, but instead, the actress ended up glowing blue too. Back in the 60s, most viewers probably didn't notice this because the picture quality wasn't great. But today, with digital restorations and high definition reruns, that blue glow is painfully obvious. It's a blooper that shows us exactly how those low-tech practical effects were done, and it reminds us that even the simplest tricks could go wrong in funny ways. Let's talk about one of the funniest recurring bloopers in the entire series, Jeannie's age. In the very first episode, Jeannie tells Major Nelson that she's been trapped in her bottle for 2,000 years, just waiting for someone to set her free. That's a pretty clear statement, right? 2,000 years. It sets up her mysterious, ancient background and makes her seem even more magical. But as the series goes on, the timeline starts to get really confusing. In one episode called Gin and Water, Jeannie's great-grandfather mentions that she last visited him about 1,500 years ago. Wait a minute, if she's been trapped in a bottle for 2,000 years, how could she have been visiting family just 1,500 years ago? That doesn't add up at all. And it gets even messier. In other episodes, Jeannie seems to know historical figures like Napoleon, which would suggest she was around in more recent centuries. Sometimes she acts like she was free and roaming the world during times when she should have been stuck in that bottle. So what's the truth? Was she lying to Tony? Did the writers just not care about keeping the timeline consistent? The most likely explanation is that the writers simply didn't worry too much about continuity. Back in the 60s, most sitcoms were designed to be standalone episodes. People didn't binge-watch shows or go back and check for mistakes like we do today. Each episode was its own little story, and as long as it was funny, nobody cared if the details didn't line up perfectly. But looking back now, Jeannie's age problem is one of the most hilarious ongoing bloopers in the show. Her magic might be powerful, but her math definitely isn't. Here's a blooper that's less about mistakes and more about the strange rules of television back in the day. Barbara Eden's costume as Jeannie was already considered pretty daring for the 1960s. It had a cropped top and flowing pants that showed a lot of skin. But the network censors drew a very hard line on one thing. Barbara Eden's belly button could never be shown on screen. Never. Not even for a second. This created a huge challenge for the costume department. They had to design outfits with high waistbands, layers of sheer fabric, and just the right positioning to make sure her navel stayed hidden. And most of the time, they succeeded. But every once in a while, there would be a slip. Maybe Barbara moved the wrong way. Maybe the fabric shifted during a scene, or maybe the camera angle was just a little too wide. Whatever the reason, there are a few rare shots where her belly button is visible for just a split second. These moments became legendary among fans. The stricter the censorship, the more people wanted to see what was being hidden. By the mid-70s, Barbara Eden was joking in interviews about how her belly button had become the most famous belly button in Hollywood. Today, those few accidental reveals remind us just how strict and silly television standards used to be. It's hard to believe that something so small, could cause such a big fuss. But that's how different things were back then. Now let's move on to the final blooper. The one that nobody noticed for years and years. This mistake is so big and so obvious once you see it that you'll wonder how it stayed hidden for so long. Are you ready? Here it is. In Season 1, Episode 4, titled Gin and Water, the story is supposed to take place in Cocoa Beach, Florida. That's where NASA astronauts lived and worked, and it's a real place with sandy beaches, flat land, and no mountains anywhere in sight. Florida is famous for being super flat. There are no hills, no mountains, nothing like that. Just beaches, swamps, and flatlands as far as you can see. But if you watch the outdoor scenes carefully, especially in the background, you'll notice something that definitely doesn't belong in Florida. Mountains. Yep, actual mountains sitting right there in the distance. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. Instead of the flat coastal landscape of Florida, the background suddenly looks like California or the American Southwest. So what happened? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. I Dream of Jeannie was filmed on the West Coast, mostly at studios and outdoor locations around Los Angeles. Traveling across the country to film in Florida would have been way too expensive and complicated. So the crew just shot everything in California and hoped nobody would notice the difference. The problem was that the hills and mountains from the Los Angeles skyline sometimes snuck into the frame and gave the whole thing away. Back in the 60s, most viewers didn't catch this mistake. Television screens were small, the picture quality was grainy, and people were more focused on Genie's magic and the comedy than on what was happening in the far background. But now, with modern reruns and digital restorations, those mountains are impossible to miss. It's a blooper that was hiding in plain sight for decades, and it completely breaks the illusion that the show is set in Florida. And there you have it, the huge blooper that nobody noticed until now. From cougars on ropes to rain machines peeking into the frame, from floating wires to disappearing bottles. I Dream of Jeannie was full of little mistakes that remind us just how much work went into making television back in the day. These bloopers don't ruin the show at all. In fact, they make it even more charming because they show us the human side of creating something magical. So here's my question for you. Did you ever notice any of these mistakes when you watched the show? Or are there other bloopers you've spotted that we didn't cover today? Drop a comment down below and let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another deep dive into classic television. Trust me, there are so many more amazing stories, ice, and hidden secrets waiting to be uncovered. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.